My name is Nick Foreman. I'm a sophomore at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I'm majoring in human physiology, which is the study of different science processes within the body. I love applying my physiology classes to distance running. I'm an avid runner. Running is to push that physiology to its limits. We get to see what people get to do. Outside of my classes, I'm also part of Lutheran Campus Ministries, or LCM. I grew up in a Lutheran church, so LCM has been a great way to continue developing my faith. I'm grateful for the opportunity to preach here today, and I'm grateful for your ongoing support of LCM. As a young child, I was involved in several church musicals. Frequently, these stories focused on parables, because they're usually a little bit easier to digest and then deliver using a cast of young children. So when I read the heading, Parable of the Talents, I was excited. It can't be that tough of a story, right? It's just one big metaphor. So I made a checklist. I really like checklists. So I said, step 1, find something uplifting. Step 2, find Jesus. Step 3, tie them together. Super easy. I was surprised when I read the passage. Jesus wasn't easy to find, and the parable ends with a man being tossed into the darkness. Notably, this passage is Jesus' final teaching session in Matthew. So it's definitely important. He had one shot to give the world a message for thousands of years, the last one, and this is what he gave us. It's supposed to be memorable and force us to think, so that's what we get to wrestle with today. But being important doesn't necessarily make it easier to process. It features a man with an illegitimate fortune, earned by reaping where he did not sow, and gathering where he did not scatter seed. Our passage for today ends by saying that more will be given to those who have plenty. This is a spit in the face to the abundant biblical passages preaching benevolence and support for those less fortunate. And to cap it all off, there's the whole weeping and gnashing of teeth, which is really just a tough image to end on. This passage is neither lighthearted nor crystal clear, and its intent is not obvious at first glance. The motto of LCM is be curious, be real, be community. At Pause, our weekly Wednesday night worship service, Pastor Kate sets aside time to discuss what stood out to us from the scripture that was read to us and what questions we might still have. This welcoming yet questioning environment is one of my favorite parts about LCM. I encourage you to be open to my questioning of this passage. It's different than what you might have heard. The master is not Jesus, the servant is not lazy, and faith to the master isn't the goal of this parable. This well-driven master featured today is decidedly not a representation of Jesus. He calls his servant wicked, slothful, lazy. He follows by admitting that his fortune was illegitimately earned. He later blames the third servant for not investing in what he was given and at least earning interest. This man is motivated by material possessions, money, financial status, and abundant wealth. You may be wondering where this money is found in a parable that preaches about talents. You may be thinking of athletes with incredible skill or musicians with beautiful voices. It's common to hear sermons calling people to use their singing, speaking, or other talents to spread the gospel. These are important things to do, yes, but using this passage to deliver that message would be misinterpreting it. In this text, a talent has tangible financial value. There's some dissension among scholars as to exactly what it represents, but anywhere between a year's wage and 20 years' wage is what they generally agree on. They all agree across the board that it had monetary value. With this in mind, consider how much the servants had been given. It was a lot, and their master still expected them to return with more. This master continues, saying, everyone who already has will receive more, and those with little will have nothing. Out of all the verses in this passage, this is the one that really stuck out to me. It seemingly defies all I was told growing up, and I suspect it strikes a similar chord in many of you. If we all lived by this verse, the rich would just get richer, and the poor would just get poorer. I struggle to believe that's what Jesus wanted for our world. This master, an advocate of sorts for the rich getting richer, is contrasted by Jesus, a washer of feet and the friend of outcasts. The passage immediately following our gospel today explicitly describes the Son of Man as one who provides. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. Our passage is likely familiar to many of you. That passage ends saying, truly I say to you, as you did it to one who is a member of my family, you did it to me. This description of Jesus echoes the descriptions common throughout the New Testament. A man of hope, kindness, and love, not a man interested in growing his wealth and casting away his servant into the outer darkness. Also in the book of Matthew, Jesus delivers his Sermon on the Mount, blessing the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He goes on to bless those who mourn, thirst, and hunger, assuring they will all be provided for. This does not sound like a man who encourages taking from those who have nothing and giving to those who already have plenty. These prominent themes of generosity, seen throughout the book of Matthew, both in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, confidently dispel any notion that the greedy master in our passage today could be Jesus. Jesus was a man of humble beginnings, not a man concerned with taking from the poor and providing for the rich. This leaves an important but challenging question. Where do we find Jesus in this passage today? I found myself playing hide-and-go-seek with Jesus in a passage filled with greed, frustration, and the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not an easy find, to say the least. I went through, again, I'm a checklist person, so I went through the mental checklist. Where can I find Jesus? The master? Definitely not. The first and second servants, they just blindly followed their master's wishes, and that didn't seem right to me. Blind following is just following, not faith. This left me with the third servant, who I eventually realized was exactly where Jesus would be found in his troublesome story. This servant was afraid. He was afraid of what would happen to him when given such a large amount of wealth. It was illegitimately earned. The master describes him as lazy, slothful. Calling him lazy does a disservice to his bravery to oppose the unjust regime around him. This servant is exactly who Jesus would support. Someone who's afraid, but stuck with what they believed in. Parallel this with our world today. A wealthy figure advocating for the accumulation of more wealth. Certainly not unheard of. A handful of people just going through the motions, neither supporting nor opposing this uneven distribution of resources. And then a third servant, afraid and ultimately alone, forced to hide his master's money in the ground. This fear and outer darkness is where we find Jesus. He is out in that darkness, standing alongside the man who refused to participate in his master's unjust dealings. As you go out this week, be curious. Be real with your thoughts on this difficult passage. It's clearly an important one, as Jesus' last teaching session in Matthew, but it's not an easy one to read either. There aren't any verses to hang on the mantelpiece. Weeping and gnashing of teeth isn't a cozy, warm welcome to hang at the door. And even more so, the passage features some troubling characters. It makes Jesus' presence not initially obvious. Think about where you are filled with that presence in your fearful times. When you feel that you've been tossed into the outer darkness, know that Jesus is with you, just as he was with the third servant in our parable today. Jesus will not leave you alone. Thanks be to God.
Amen.